Welcome back to the Inside Nebraska Recruiting Blitz podcast. As always, I'm Tim Verghese. This week, we're just going to dive into the upcoming visitor list. Nebraska's back at home for the first time in about a month. Last time they were at home was for the Rutgers game in early October. After a bye week, a road game stretch, they're back at home and taking full advantage of the opportunity to showcase the environment inside Memorial Stadium. Um, and the opportunity to just get guys on campus. The 2:30 kick really helps Nebraska out. Just having an opportunity for some regional guys to make the drive in, for some guys out of the state to make the flight in. And for some though, it would have helped if this had been a later kick. I was already talking to some recruits that had hoped to make it in town, but with their own playoff schedule and with the Nebraska's game at 2:30, it's just too tight of a turnaround to make the drive in or make the flight in. But regardless, Nebraska's still going to have a pretty impressive visitor list. And we're going to touch on some of the headliners today. We'll have a full visitor list over at InsideNebraska.com by the end of this week. So be sure to stay tuned for that content. While we're at it as well, please be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. We recently crossed 10K. Now we're shooting for 15K. So please help us on that journey. On that note, let's get into it. I guess we'll start here. We spent Friday out in Sioux City, Iowa, to go see Bishop Heelan take on MOC Floyd Valley. My initial plan was there to go see Bishop Heelan's 2026 three-star linebacker Kasen Thomas, who Nebraska offered earlier this month. Nebraska actually had him on campus back for the Colorado game for a visit. And shortly after watching a bit more of his junior film, they went ahead and offered, and he's quickly risen up the board as one of the top linebacker targets. But he's a guy that's on a lot of Big Ten radars right now. Iowa was the first program to offer. They've been involved for a very long time. They're the favorite in that recruitment. Wisconsin offered over the weekend. Matt Campbell from Iowa State was there on Friday to go see him as well. And so he's a priority. He's becoming a priority target for a lot of programs early on. It's not hard to see why. He's an athletic linebacker with some old school physicality. Can play all three linebacker spots in Nebraska's defense. Nebraska hopes to get him back on campus at some point for a visit, either the rest of the season, one of these last two home games, or at some point next year. But hoping to get him back on campus, hoping to make him feel like a priority. Proximity is kind of something that Nebraska has in their favor. But we'll see how much of an impact the proximity has, compared to the time that Iowa spent in that recruitment, the energy that Iowa State's spending that recruitment, and of course, with Wisconsin in there now, you can't count out Luke Fickell for any Midwest defender at this point, just because of the way he recruits and kind of the way his defense kind of sells itself. Um, I went there for Thomas, but while I was there, kind of scouting both sides of the ball, what kept getting my eyes drawn to MOC Floyd Valley's 2026 defensive end, Draeden Punt. He's a 6'6.5", 220-pound prospect who you can't miss. Obviously, in that against that level of competition, he towers over everybody at 6'6.5". Honestly, might even be closer to 6'7" at this point. But he plays both sides of the ball, played offensive tackle for them, played defensive end for them. His futures on the defensive side of the ball just looks a lot more fluid and athletic out there on the defensive side of the ball. He picked up his first offer over the weekend from Kansas State while on a visit there, and he told me he's actually planning to visit Nebraska this weekend for the UCLA game. He's one of the few unoffered visitors that's going to be in town this weekend. A guy that has a chance to leave Lincoln with an offer from the staff. You look at the frame, you look at the film he's put up as a junior. It's hard not to see a little bit of James Williams in his game, with just a lengthy pass rusher that's really raw, but has a lot of raw natural traits. A couple other names on the visitor list. We'll start with the 2025 notable visitors. A couple commits making notable visits. Nebraska's going to have a bunch of the in-state commits back in town, expecting Isaiah Mosey back in town as well. Nebraska's four-star commit out of Lee Summit, wide receiver commit out of Lee Summit North, to come see his dad, come see the team, his future team, and hang out with them. But Houston Quijano Torres, the three-star center commit, He committed to Nebraska over the summer after making an official visit back in June. But he's never seen a game in Memorial Stadium. He's never had that opportunity. Obviously, plays in Hawaii, so hasn't had the opportunity to make it in so far. But this week he plans to change that. He's going to fly in with his family to come experience the game at Memorial Stadium. Julian Marks, Nebraska's most recent commit, who committed after the Indiana game last week, he's making his official visit next week. He's excited about that. Just an opportunity to see Lincoln for the first time in a while. He kind of committed somewhat sight unseen. He hasn't visited Nebraska at least since the summer. He hasn't visited Nebraska, so it's been a good bit since he's been in town. But it was his relationships on campus that got him to flip, and now he's going to have an opportunity to kind of experience everything all together. Get an opportunity to kind of see what the program has to offer, sit down with Matt Rule, talk to Jamar Mosey, who is so critical in that recruitment, talk to Donovan Raiola about what the expectations are for him when he gets on campus, and just experience the game at Memorial Stadium. So it's a good opportunity for him, good weekend visit ahead for him. And then the big news, our own Greg Smith broke the news Sunday evening that a four-star tight end, Chase Loftin out of Millard South right here in Omaha, is planning to visit Nebraska this weekend as Nebraska tries to flip him away from Florida State. Sources close to the situation feel confident, or at least feel like Nebraska is well positioned to pull off that flip. And that's a recruitment that Nebraska, once again, they've stayed on top of it. They lost him out to Florida. They lost out to Florida State over the summer. Actually, technically would have come in third behind A&M over the summer, but they kept chipping away. Nebraska continued to just keep chipping away at Lofton. They've communicated with him throughout, even after losing out his commitment initially. They've stayed in communication. They've let him know he's a priority. They've let him know just where he fits into the offense and how big of an importance it is to get him into the offense. And despite already having a tight end commit in this class in Bear Tenney, despite having Carter Nelson on campus and Ian Flint and these guys on campus, they've got a good group of young tight ends, or and Nelson now technically a receiver, but could still evolve and grow into a tight end. But they still made Lofton a priority, which I think resonates with him, and it says a lot, I think, about what the staff thinks of him. You see the senior year he's having at Millard South. Kind of playing some dominant ball for them this year, kind of leading them to, they're obviously the favorites to win the Class A state championship, and he's a big reason for that. Just his play in that offense this year. A guy that would initially start out very similar to Carter Nelson, needs some time to develop into an inline tight end. Doesn't really have the background to have his hand in the dirt just yet, but a guy that can play some outside receiver, can play out of the slot, can line up a couple of different ways, kind of use them like they do Thomas Fidone this year, kind of outside of that slot receiver position. But he's a guy that Nebraska's going to make room for. Even with the space, the tight ends they have on campus, with the class being what it is, Chase Lofton is a guy you make room for, and I think Nebraska is going to do that. So one to keep an eye on this weekend. He's walking into the weekend as a Florida State commit. Could come out of the weekend a Nebraska commit. So definitely keep an eye on that one going into the weekend. Another 2025 target in town, Kamori Moore, the three-star defensive tackle from Lee Summit North, teammate of Isaiah Mosey, former player under Jamar Mosey, who was the head coach at Lee Summit North prior to leaving after the 2023 season. But Moore is a guy that, I've said this before, we'll keep saying this, Moore is a recruitment that Nebraska can absolutely win if and when they choose to make him a priority. As of right now, they're kind of keeping him warm, managing their own, defensive line class with 3 commits already, and trying to figure out, kind of where Moore would potentially fit into that, and if he would. And, I think Moore's a recruitment that they would, of course, like to win, but they're one that, Iowa State has made him a big priority. They hosted him on campus last weekend. And I think at this point, Nebraska would be okay with potentially losing him to Iowa State at this point, just because assessing their own needs in the class, assessing their current defensive line class compared to what Moore would potentially bring. Turning the page, I think this is a big weekend for pass catchers. Looking ahead to 2026, Nebraska is going to have 4-star wide receiver Vance Spafford, one of the top receivers in the country per Rivals, on campus this weekend. Nebraska made the top 8 for him. And Nebraska's trying to make up ground on Georgia, Ole Miss, and Oregon. Those are the 3 schools we've been told are the ones out ahead. Georgia in particular is a school to beat. in that recruitment. He went to a visit to Georgia earlier this month, and the Bulldogs made a really, really big impression. Many see them as a school to beat in that recruitment. Nebraska's hoping to make up some of that ground this weekend. He visited over the summer Jamar Mosey. This is another Jamar Mosey recruitment. Mosey's been big there. Was able to get him in town over the summer at the end of July, and then now they're getting him back on campus for a game day visit. And the hope is again the opportunity to potentially play with Dylan Raiola, Nebraska's offense, and the program that Matt Rule's building are what they're trying to sell to him. Another top 26 receiver expected to be in town, Xavier McDonald out of Mississippi. He's a bigger framed receiver, a big outside receiver. With some bounce, a guy that can go up and get it, plays really well outside of his frame. Can do some things after the catch as well. Just a raw athlete. Stands about 6'3" right now. He's another one that going to be tough to pull him away from some of those SEC programs. Obviously, the ones in state, the ones in the region, the Alabamas, the Tennessees, the Ole Miss, the Mississippi States, the Floridas, etc. of the world. It's going to be tough to beat there, but Nebraska's trying to build some inroads in Mississippi, and this would go, McDonald's a big one in 2026. In 2027, Nebraska's hosting the number 4 prospect and the number 1 receiver, Ethan Boobie Feaster out of DeSoto, Texas. DeSoto is a powerhouse program. It's produced, obviously, Mario Buford on campus right now, came out of DeSoto. The cycle before, Jonte Cook, who's playing at Texas at receiver. He's from DeSoto. Trey Wisner, their star running back, who's been exceptional this year in the last few games, was also from DeSoto. Byron Murphy, drafted to the Seahawks from DeSoto. Von Miller, Shamar Turner over at A&M right now. Like the list goes on. DeSoto produces high-level college football players and NFL players, and Feaster's the next one. A guy that Nebraska, obviously is a guy that has the who's in that recruitment already. He had double-digit offers before he even started high school. If you want to get an idea of how big his recruitment is already as a sophomore in high school. But a guy that, Texas early favorite, LSU very much involved, Texas A&M also involved. Some of these national powers are going to keep growing in their interest and how hard they push. Oregon's going to continue to push. I mentioned LSU already, but some of these now, Ohio State, Kentucky, Auburn, Alabama, Florida. Some of these programs that do a good job of spot recruiting the state are going to come in and try and make Feaster feel like a priority. I said Kentucky in there. I probably shouldn't have said Kentucky in there, but it's been a day. Anyway, another 27 receiver worth noting, Chance McPike out of Lutheran North in St. Louis. McPike's a guy having a breakout sophomore season, landed his first offer from Tennessee. Nebraska followed shortly after to become his second Power 4 offer. And they've quickly made him a priority. They see him as a guy that could potentially play both sides of the ball, but early on, you kind of like the film at receiver. So far, he's had an exceptional sophomore season for Lutheran North. They just pulled off a big upset win over Cardinal Ritter, which is where Nebraska's 2025 4-star running back commit Jamarian Parker plays. It was a big win for McPike and his Lutheran North team. And now he plans to visit Nebraska this weekend. So Nebraska's going to have a chance to kind of impress him and get an early foot in the door there. They already have a foot in the door, kind of get an early improve your standing pretty early on because, he looks like a guy that's going to end up being one of the top prospects in St. Louis in that cycle. Flipping back to 2026, another name just worth mentioning as a headliner on the defensive side of the ball, Justin Lewis, a 3-star defensive back out of California, Rancho Cucamonga High School out in the greater Los Angeles area. Lewis is a lengthy DB that's been on Nebraska's radar for some time. He's had a lot to like about Nebraska for a while. Him and me have been talking for months at this point, and he keeps talking about trying to make it down on campus. Well, he's finally making it down for the UCLA game. He's excited to come out and see the program for the very first time. He's read a lot about it. He's talked with the coaching staff. There's some mutual interest and mutual love early on. So he's excited to just kind of see the program for himself and feel out, what a visit. And we'll see what a visit does for him and where that puts Nebraska, as they battle some national powers, specifically some West Coast schools out ahead early with Lewis. Elsewhere in 2027, two other names I wanted to pass along. Joseph Graves and Dwayne Jones, 2 defensive linemen out of Tulsa Booker T. Washington High School, out of Oklahoma. Graves and Jones were offered by Nebraska earlier this month on the same day. Two guys having really strong sophomore years as well. At Booker T, playing against some of the better schools in the state of Oklahoma. Two guys that can kind of play outside as a defensive end, could grow into interior defensive line prospects, have some versatility in that sense, and kind of fit what Nebraska is looking for. Both those guys are hoping to make it in this weekend. We'll just see. For them, it's going to be driving up from Tulsa, and so it really just depends on they've got a game and whether they can make it in by 2:30 or not. But they're hoping to be in town for the visit. And those are two guys I think Nebraska's working on early on. And I wrote about it last week. Be sure to go to InsideNebraska.com and read that. But Oklahoma is becoming a state that Nebraska is really trying to make a priority moving forward. Oklahoma is trying to figure out their footing in the SEC. Oklahoma State's flailing a little bit, and Mike Gundy's legitimately on the hot seat. So while those two programs are figuring things out, Nebraska has the relationships to kind of get into that state and capitalize. They're really trying. You look in 2026, they've made Taj Overton, a guy they see as a defensive lineman out of Owasso, who can play both sides of the ball. They made him a priority. He was on campus earlier this season and spent some time with former Nebraska defensive lineman Damian Daniels. That's a good relationship for Nebraska to have and a good thing to have in their back pocket. Is that conversation and just the opportunity to be like, hey, Damian went to Nebraska and went to the league. You could do the same. So he's a guy in 2026 they've made a priority. Caden Jones out of Jenks, Oklahoma is another guy they've made a priority early on, and he visited for the Colorado game. They're hoping to get him back in town at some point. But El Badu here for us here with the Recruiting Blitz. We'll be back next week with a full recap from the visit weekend. Like I said, we'll have a full visit list up at InsideNebraska.com later this week, so stay tuned for that. But every reaction, everything you want to hear from this visit weekend, we'll have that ready for you after the weekend. So stay tuned here at InsideNebraska.com. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we will be back next week.